Babe the Gallant Pig, Chapter 9. Was it Babe? Go home, pig, Farmer Hoggett said in a voice that was so quiet and so cold Babe hardly recognized it. Bewildered, he trotted off obediently, while behind him the farmer picked up the dead ewe and carried it to the Land Rover. Then, with Fly's help, he began the task of rescuing those sheep that were caught or stuck and of making sure no others were badly hurt. This done, he left Fly to guard the flock and drove home. Back at the farm, Babe felt very sad. The sky was cloudless, the air still crisp, but this was a very different pig from the one that had cantered carefree up the hill not half an hour ago. In those 30 minutes, he had seen naked fear, cruelty, and death. And now, to cap it all off, the boss was angry with him and had sent him home in some sort of disgrace. What had he done wrong? He'd only done his duty, as a good sheep pig should. He sat in the doorway of the stables and watched as the Land Rover drove into the yard, poor Ma's head lolling loosely over the back. He saw the boss get out and go into the house, and then a few minutes later come out again, carrying something in the crook of one arm, a long, thin, kind of black, shiny tube, and walked toward him. Come, pig, Farmer Hoggett said in that same cold voice, and strode past him into the stables, while at the same moment, inside the farmhouse, the telephone began to ring, and it stopped as Mrs. Hoggett picked it up. Obediently, Babe followed the farmer into the dark interior. It was not so dark, however, that he could not see clearly that the boss was pointing that black, shiny tube at him, and then he sat down and waited, supposing that perhaps it was some machine for giving out food, and that some quite unexpected surprise would come out of its two small round mouths, held now quite close to his face. At that instant, Mrs. Hoggett's voice sounded across the yard, calling her husband's name from the open kitchen window. He frowned, lowered the shiny tube, and poked his head around the stable door. "Oh, there you are!" cried Mrs. Hoggett. "What do you think? That was the police, it was. Them ringing up every farmer in the district to warn 'em. There's sheep worrying dogs around, and they've killed 6 sheep t'other side of the valley only last night. They've been seen, they have. 2 of 'em 'tis, a big black un and a little brown un. They say shoot 'em on sight if you do see 'em. You better get back up that hill and make sure ours are all right. Do you want me to fetch your gun?" "No," said Farmer Hoggett. "It's all right," he said. He waited till his wife had shut the window and disappeared. Then he walked into the sunlight with Babe following him. "Sit, pig," he said, but now his voice was warm and friendly again. He looked closely at the trusting face turned up to him, and he saw, sticking to the side of Babe's mouth, some hairs, some black hairs, and a few brown ones too. He shook his head in wonder, and that slow grin fell over his face. "I reckon you gave him something to worry about," he said, and opened the gun and took out the cartridges. Meanwhile, Fly, standing guard up in the far field, was terribly agitated. She knew, of course, that some dogs would attack sheep, sometimes even the very dogs trained to look after them, but surely not her sheep pig. Surely Babe could not have done such a thing. Yet there he had been at the center of the chaos, blood-stained and standing over a dead ewe. What would the boss do to him, and perhaps had already done? She could not leave these fools to find out. At least, though, she suddenly realized they could tell her what happened if the shock hadn't driven what little sense they had out of their stupid heads. Never before in her long life had Fly sunk to engaging a sheep in conversation. They were there to be ordered about like soldiers, and, like soldiers, never to answer back. She approached the nearest one with distaste, and it promptly backed away from her. "Stand still, fool," she barked, "and tell me who chased you. Who killed that old one?" "Wolf," said the sheep automatically. Fly growled with annoyance. Was that the only word the half-wits knew? She put the question differently. "Was it the pig that chased you? Was it Babe?" she asked. "Babe," bleated the sheep eagerly. "What does that mean, bonehead?" barked Fly. "Was it or wasn't it?" "Wolf," said the sheep. Somehow Fly controlled her anger at the creature's stupidity. I must know what happened, she thought. Babe's always talking about being polite to these woolly idiots. I will have to try it. I must know. She took a deep breath. "Please," she said. The sheep, which had begun to graze, raised its head sharply and stared at her with an expression of total amazement. "Say that again," it said, and a number of others, overhearing, moved toward the collie. Please, said Fly, swallowing hard, could you be kind enough to tell me? Hark! Interrupted the first sheep. Hark! Hark! Whereupon the whole flock ran and gathered round. They stood in silence, every eye fixed wonderingly on her, every mouth hanging open. Nincompoops, thought Fly. Just when I wanted to ask one quietly, the whole fat head lot come around. But I must know the truth about my babe, no matter how terrible it is. Please, she said once more, in a voice choked with the effort of being humble, could you be kind enough to tell me what happened this morning? Did Babe? But she got no further, for at the mention of the pig's name, the whole flock burst into a great cry of Babe! Listening for the first time ever to what the sheep were actually saying, Fly could hear individual voices competing to make themselves heard in what was nothing less than a hymn of praise. Babe came! He saved us! He drove the wolves away! He made them pay! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! What a sense of relief flooded her as she heard and understood the words of the sheep. It had been the sheep warriors after all, and her boy had come to the rescue. He was the villain, not the hero. He was not the villain, he was the hero. Hoggett and Babe heard the racket as they climbed the hill, and the farmer sent the pig ahead, fearing perhaps that the warriors had returned. Under the cover of noise, Babe arrived on the scene unnoticed by Fly, just in time to hear her reply to the flock. Oh, thank you, she cried to the flock. Thank you all so much for telling me. How kind of you. Gosh, Mum, said a voice behind her, what's come over you?